everyone, I'm Sal, co-creator of Salt and Pepper Productions, and I'm back with another Danganronpa video. Today I'm going to complete my Saddest Danganronpa Deaths duology. In part 1, I selected one victim from each of the 5 main installments. I discussed what made those character deaths stand out and why they deserved a spot in the video. Part 2 will focus on my honorable mentions, the character deaths that didn't make the first video but are still worth calling attention to. For this video, I decided to focus on 8 characters. Some characters will get more attention than others because I find their situation more interesting, so there's more for me to discuss. I apologize in advance if I don't spend that much time on characters you would have liked me to go more in depth on. Without further ado, my honorable mentions are Mukuro Ikusaba, Kiyotaka Ishimaru, Hifumi Yamada, Yuta Asahina, Seiko Kimura, Koichi Kizakura, Sonosuke Izayoi, and Kyoko Kirigiri. When Mukuro died in the first chapter of the first game, it was a shocking moment. I don't think anyone was expecting someone to die immediately after Sayaka Maizono. It was a pretty brutal way to go, too. In retrospect, Mukuro's death is also very tragic. During the final class trial, we learn that she was killed by her own sister, the person she dedicated her life to, the person she loved and supported wholeheartedly. Kiyotaka's death and Hifumi's death go hand in hand. They were at odds with each other because of alter ego, and Celestia Ludenberg took advantage of their rivalry. They both became pawns in her murder scheme. Still, if I had to pick between the two, I think I'd say Hifumi's death was a little more tragic. Celeste manipulated both Kiyotaka and Hifumi, but her manipulation of Hifumi was much more direct. He was the one Celeste fed her lies to. He was the one who committed murder on her behalf. Once Hifumi fulfilled his role, Celeste double-crossed him. As Hifumi succumbed to his head injury, he remembered life before the tragedy. He remembered the life he had with his fellow classmates, i.e. his friends, before the killing game started. Unfortunately, the game kind of treats his death like a joke by having him magically come back to life before dying a second time. Yuta is Aoi Asahina's younger brother. From the moment we meet him, it's clear that he looks up to and takes after his sister. He's very friendly and chipper. He uses the same technique she uses to remember people's names, and he's an athlete. Yuta's specialty is track. He's a decent swimmer, but he isn't on Aoi's level. He could never catch up to her. The Asahina siblings were close, hence why Yuta was captured and brought to Toa City. He eventually becomes a target in the demon hunting game. Yuta was very frustrated and confused by the situation. He was determined to escape and reunite with his family and friends. When Yuta meets Komaru and Toko, he's excited and relieved to find others in his position. The trio tries to cross a bridge leading out of the city, but they quickly discover that half the bridge is gone. Shortly after that, the Monokuma kids use explosives to destroy the rest of the bridge. The trio narrowly escapes death. Fed up with all the despair and setbacks he's faced, Yuta decides to take matters into his own hands. He decides that he's going to swim to safety and come back with help. The girls aren't enthused by Yuta's plan. Komaru expresses concern, and Toko scolds him for being reckless. Nonetheless, Yuta remains undeterred. After exchanging some parting words with Komaru, Yuta jumps off the bridge and starts dashing through the water. A few seconds later, his wristband starts to beep and flash a bright red light. There's a huge explosion, and that's the end of it. Yuta's death happened so fast, I don't think he really had time to process what was happening. His sudden demise stunned the girls. Komaru fell apart and nearly gave up after that. Toko was left with the troubling realization that she would have to break the news to Aoi the next time she sees her. I can only imagine how rough that conversation must have been. During his short time on screen, Yuta did a pretty good job hiding his despair from everyone. He was young, so I'm sure he felt scared and alone, being away from his sister and their parents. The constant despair and frustration motivated him to do something reckless. He died trying to be a hero. He died trying to help his new friends. If Juzo Sakakura is the Mondo Owada of Danganronpa 3, then Seiko is the Chihiro Fujisaki of Danganronpa 3. They're both sweet, likable characters who didn't deserve to die. When their bodies were discovered, they were positioned in a way that resembled a crucifixion, and prior to their deaths, they managed to create something that would help the other characters survive. To understand Seiko's story, we need to understand her relationship with Ruruka Ando and Sonosuke. The trio met when they were children. Their paths crossed when they witnessed two dogs get hit by a motorcycle. Seiko immediately jumped in and tried to save the dogs using her medicine. To Ruruka's amazement, one of the dogs survived. After introducing themselves, Ruruka gave Seiko some homemade candy and left. The next time they hang out, Seiko reveals that she can't eat sugar because she's on this special medication. Feeling happy to have a new friend and guilty that she can't accept sweets from said friend, Seiko offers to help Ruruka with anything she needs. Using her pharmaceutical talent, Seiko starts doing small favors for Ruruka. At first, Ruruka's requests were fairly innocent, and Seiko was more than happy to lend a hand. But as the years go by and Ruruka's requests become more demanding, Seiko begins to feel uncomfortable and question Ruruka's sincerity. She feels like she's trying too hard to please Ruruka and that Ruruka is taking advantage of her generosity. Interestingly, Ruruka knows that their friendship dynamic is unfair, and she's frustrated because she believes the only way to repay Seiko is by giving her sweets. In 2022, I posted a video titled How Talent Turned Junko Enoshima into a Villain. Characters who resent but rely on their talents. In that video, I discussed the complex relationship many characters have with their talents. One particular character from Danganronpa 0 disdains his talent but chooses to embrace it because he would have nothing without it. He would be nothing without it. Ruruka is similar in this regard. She takes pride in her confection skills, believing she has nothing else to offer the world. Making sweets is the only thing she's good for, so when people don't eat her sweets, she takes it personally. Being rejected by Seiko specifically hurt because Ruruka viewed Seiko as more than a friend. She idolized Seiko and thought of her as her personal hero. She didn't understand or didn't accept that Seiko was a human being with limitations. So to her, Seiko refusing to accept her sweets was the ultimate rejection. Years go by and the two girls slowly begin to resent each other. Seiko believed Ruruka relied on her too much, that she was just using her for her medicine, and Ruruka believed Seiko was rejecting her the worst way possible. Flash forward to when they're second-year students at Hope's Peak Academy. Ruruka visits Seiko so she can borrow a drug and use it as an ingredient in her exam project. Thanks to the bumbling Nagito Komaeda, there's a mix-up and Ruruka ends up with the wrong drug. The following day, Seiko literally runs into Nagito, and the two get their bags mixed up. Both incidents would have devastating consequences for Seiko. Nagito wanted to disrupt the exams by lacing the judges' drinks with laxatives and by setting off explosives he planted in the gym. Things don't go exactly as planned because Ruruka wound up with the laxative and Seiko wound up with the detonator. Immediately after eating Ruruka's pastries, the judges experienced digestive distress. Ruruka believed Seiko sabotaged her project by giving her the wrong drug on purpose. When Seiko tries to give the judges something to ease their digestive systems, she, along with everyone else, discovers the detonator. The faculty had received a threat prior to the exams, so the judges accuse Seiko of being responsible based on the circumstances. While this is happening, Ruruka lashes out at Seiko and tells her they're no longer friends. Ruruka felt betrayed because she received the wrong drug and it ruined her project. Seiko felt betrayed because she constantly did favors for Ruruka only to get tossed aside the one time things went wrong. These girls have been harboring ill feelings for each other for quite some time, and this incident brought all those negative emotions to the surface. You feel bad for Seiko because you know none of this is her fault. You know Ruruka's anger is misplaced, that she's being cruel, irrational, and unfair. While the girls are yelling at each other, they get attacked by a dog Nagito interacted with. When they try to get away from the dog, they accidentally trigger the detonator, setting off the explosives and destroying the gym. Seiko, Ruruka, and Sonosuke were expelled shortly thereafter. Headmaster Jin Kirigiri knew Nagito was the one who plotted the entire incident, but he believed Nagito and his talent were too valuable to let go. All three were railroaded to protect Nagito, but Seiko got the worst of it. She had to deal with her childhood friends ganging up on her and the school faculty ganging up on her. That's probably why Kyosuke Munakata took her under his wing. Chisa Yukizome probably asked him to look after Seiko because, as Nagito's teacher, she knew the whole story and understood that Seiko got screwed over the most. Flash forward to when the tragedy starts. The Future Foundation is formed, and Seiko becomes one of the branch leaders. When the Future Foundation killing game begins, she's forced to watch people die on her watch. She's also forced to face Ruruka again. When Ruruka and Sonosuke accuse her of being the one behind the killing game, all those negative emotions from that fateful day at Hope's Peak return. The three proceed to chase and attack each other. As the chase intensifies, the girls reflect on their past and question why things turned out the way they did. Ruruka manages to escape, and the former friends never resolve their issues. The third sleep period is about to start. Seiko, now exhausted and alone, sits down and reflects on her recent shortcomings and regrets. She thinks about the killing game's first victims and how she failed to save them. Seiko always had a big heart. She was always eager to help others. We saw this when she tried to save those dogs. We saw this when she did favors for Ruruka. And we saw this when she shared her drugs with other Hope's Peak Academy students. Her position in the Future Foundation gave her an opportunity to help people on a larger scale. Her job was to protect civilians from the ultimate despair, but she couldn't even protect her colleagues. One of her drugs would save someone later on, but she wouldn't live to see that accomplishment. Right before the third sleep period begins, Seiko pulls out a small piece of candy, the same candy Ruruka gave her the day they met. It's implied that Ruruka was Seiko's first friend. For all we know, Ruruka giving Seiko that candy was the first nice thing anyone had ever done for her. Regardless of whether that's the case or not, young Seiko really appreciated the gesture and decided to keep it. Now, you'd think she'd throw the candy away after their fallout in high school, but that's not the case. She continued to carry it with her everywhere she went. Even though Seiko's opinion of Ruruka has changed, the friendship they had was real. The care she had for Ruruka was real. So despite everything that had happened, no matter how angry and hurt Seiko was, she couldn't let go of the item that represented their friendship. As Seiko stares at the candy, the countdown drops to 0. The drug in her wristband puts her to sleep, but because she lost consciousness underneath a Monokuma monitor, her wristband wakes her up during the attacking period. The monitor above her plays a pre-recorded video of Monokuma, and then it plays the Monokuma's Gloomy Sunday video. Seiko proceeds to repeatedly slam her body into the wall before stabbing herself in the heart. If I didn't pick Juzo for the Danganronpa 3 section, I would have picked Seiko. Her story arc had a very tragic ending. She died believing she was useless and a failure. She died wishing her friendship with Ruruka didn't go awry. Koichi was a talent scout for Hope's Peak Academy prior to the tragedy. He was also friends with Kyoko's father, Jin. We don't know that much about their friendship, but seeing how Koichi was the one who took the father-daughter picture Jin kept on his desk, I think it's safe to say they've known each other for a long time and were very close. When the chaos at Hope's Peak spread to the outside world, the adults formulated a plan. Jin would stay behind and turn the old school building into a shelter to protect Class 78. Koichi and the others would leave campus and create the Future Foundation to fight off the despair. Before the two friends part ways, Jin asks Koichi to look after Kyoko if something bad happens to him or the Shelter Project. In response, Koichi vows to protect Kyoko with his life. 1 year passed before the Despair Twins launched the next phase of Junko's plan. They took over the shelter, killed Jin, and commenced the 78th class killing game. In response, the Future Foundation launched a rescue mission. Koichi and several others made their way to the school and tried to save the students who were trapped inside. Unfortunately, Junko was one step ahead of them. She installed heavy weaponry all around the school's perimeter. The weapons would shoot anything that moved, thus preventing reinforcements from reaching the school. The students were completely unaware of the battle occurring outside. They could hear the machinery firing off, but they couldn't identify the sounds. Junko dropped a few hints while controlling Monokuma. She alluded to the Future Foundation's efforts, but she didn't tell her classmates about the failed rescue attempt until the final class trial. Koichi was the only one who survived the onslaught, Kyoko at the forefront of his mind the entire time. When the Future Foundation killing game began, Koichi was determined to protect Kyoko and make up for his failure at the school. Koichi's forbidding action was opening his left fist. If he came across a physical threat while shadowing Kyoko, he would have been at a huge disadvantage. He did not let this deter him, though. When a physical threat appeared in the form of Juzo, Koichi used his wit to outsmart and incapacitate him. Unfortunately, it didn't take long for his forbidding action to catch up to him. Immediately after taking care of Juzo, Koichi found himself in a situation where he had to use both hands. When Kyoko fell into Ruruka's trap, Koichi caught her with his left hand and clung to safety with his right hand. As the poison from his wristband infected his bloodstream, he used the last of his strength to lift Kyoko out of the chasm. Shortly thereafter, his body slipped off the edge and disappeared into the void. Unlike most of the characters introduced in the anime, Koichi had a deep personal connection to characters from the previous installments, which made his sacrifice all the more impactful. Koichi died with a smile on his face, content that he kept his promise to Jin. Kyoko was stunned, but because of the killing game and her role as a detective, she couldn't dwell on Koichi's death nor grapple with the emotions that came with it. We don't know what happened to Koichi's body after it fell into the chasm. I'm sure the other Future Foundation members were laid to rest after everything settled down, but I'm not confident they recovered his body. Koichi's death was sad, but it was also very noble and heroic. If I ever make a video covering the most honorable Danganronpa deaths, he'll definitely be my pick for the Danganronpa 3 section. When Kyoko's group discovered Sonosuke's body in Future Arc Episode 6, it was a shocking moment. After examining Sonosuke's body, investigating the library, and nearly dying, Kyoko deduced that Ruruka was the one who killed him. This was another shocking reveal. Ruruka's forbidding action was letting someone exit the building, and Sonosuke discovered a possible exit shortly before his death. Kyoko and the viewers assumed that Sonosuke tried to escape, and that's why Ruruka killed him. But later on, we learn that wasn't the case. The circumstances behind Sonosuke's death were slightly different. Through a flashback, we learn that Sonosuke had no intention of leaving. He hid the door and set traps all over the room. While Ruruka was worried that someone would find the door and try to escape, that wasn't her biggest concern. What she feared most was the slim possibility that Sonosuke would try to escape. Sonosuke was Ruruka's childhood sweetheart. He's been by her side for as long as she can remember. After the Seiko incident, Sonosuke became the only person Ruruka believed she could trust or rely on. Ruruka couldn't bear the thought of Sonosuke betraying her. She knew how irrational this fear was, but once it entered her mind, she couldn't let it go. So she decided to kill him before he could betray her. Astonishingly, Sonosuke wasn't angered by Ruruka's actions. He was incredibly understanding. He knew her better than anyone, and he could see how much her decision hurt her. After embracing and kissing her one last time, he assures her that he doesn't feel betrayed and that he still loves her. Similar to Mukuro's death, Sonosuke's death is sad in retrospect. Both characters were killed by someone they loved, someone who didn't deserve their unwavering loyalty. Sonosuke had very little screen time prior to his death. Outside of being Ruruka's boyfriend, there isn't much to him as a character. Even so, I thought the flashback was very effective. Sonosuke didn't deserve to die like that, and knowing that the exit was fake makes his death even more unfair. Okay, Kyoko didn't actually die, so I probably shouldn't include her in this video, but her supposed death in Future Arc Episode 9 was very emotional, as was Makoto's reaction. Kyoko's forbidding action was allowing Makoto to survive the first 4 rounds of the Future Foundation killing game. She hid this from Makoto because she knows how selfless and reckless he can be. If Makoto had learned what Kyoko's forbidding action was, he would have sacrificed himself to save her, and she couldn't let that happen. She was willing to die just so he could live. Many fans have noted that Kyoko's actions in the anime contrast her actions in the first game. During the 78th class killing game, she put solving the mystery of the school ahead of everything else. She wasn't afraid of putting herself at risk, and she wasn't overly concerned about putting her classmates at risk. Her attitude didn't change until after the 5th class trial, when Makoto was nearly killed in her place. Prior to the 5th trial, Kyoko and Makoto had developed a mutual respect for each other. Kyoko comforted Makoto after Sayaka's death, and she acted as his mentor, teaching him how to analyze evidence and reach his own conclusions. In return, Makoto was incredibly loyal. He stood by Kyoko whenever Byakuya gave her a hard time, and he helped her with personal quests, like moving Alter Ego and distracting Monokuma. Unbeknownst to them, the Mukuro Ikusaba case would put their new partnership to the test. The entire case was a trap orchestrated by Junko, who wanted to eliminate the troublesome detective. Upon realizing this, Kyoko did everything she could to avoid suspicion and stretch the trial out. This included placing some doubt on Makoto's innocence. When Makoto has an opportunity to call Kyoko out on a lie, he chooses not to, believing that she was lying for a good reason. When Makoto begins to question the validity of the case, Junko, as Monokuma, announces that the trial is over and forces everyone to vote. This surprises everyone, including Kyoko. Makoto is found guilty, but he survives his execution thanks to Alter Ego's interference. Kyoko blamed herself for Makoto's near-death experience. In the aftermath, she experienced a tremendous amount of shame and regret. During the Future Foundation killing game, Makoto's survival was Kyoko's #1 priority. Sure, she spent most of her time investigating the crime scenes, trying to deduce who the mastermind was, but Makoto was at the forefront of her mind. She was worried about him while they were apart. When Kyosuke captures Makoto in Future Arc Episode 4, Kyoko wants to save him, but Kazuo Tengen interjects. He decides to face Kyosuke and rescue Makoto himself. When Kyoko begins to protest, Kazuo reminds her of her duty as a detective. Kyoko's behavior shows us how much she regrets her prior actions, how much she has grown since the first killing game, and how much she values Makoto and their friendship. They didn't have that much screen time together in Danganronpa 3, but the special bond between them was still apparent. So when Kyoko dies in Makoto's place, it's heart-wrenching. When Future Arc Episode 9 first aired, many fans suspected that Kyoko was actually alive and in a coma because a medicine bottle rolled past her body when the others woke up. The idea was that Kyoko found this bottle while examining Seiko's body and consumed the drug to counteract the poison from her wristband. This theory wound up being correct. It was a smart move on Kyoko's part, but there was no guarantee her plan would work. Hence why she told Makoto to never give up hope no matter what happens. She took a gamble with her life because the alternative, losing Makoto, was unthinkable. Kyoko has been around since the first game. Because of this, both the characters and the viewers have a strong emotional attachment to her. I care about her character, and I care about her relationship with Makoto. After Future Arc Episode 9 aired, I spent the rest of the show hoping the medicine bottle theory was correct. That's why, even if it's not completely appropriate, I'm including Kyoko in my honorable mentions list. Thank you for watching the video. So, what do you think of my honorable mentions list? Do you agree with anything I had to say? Do you disagree with anything I had to say? Let us know in the comments below. I definitely want to know if you think any characters in this video should have appeared in my previous video, because, like I said, I think I could have swapped Juzo out with Seiko. It was really hard to decide who to pick for the Danganronpa 3 section of the last video. So yeah, let me know if anybody from this video should have been in the first video. Also, let me know if you think I should have included other characters in my honorable mentions list, or if I should have spent more time or less time on some of the characters who made my honorable mentions list. Don't be afraid to like and subscribe. Check out our other videos if you haven't already. Be sure to share this video, and hopefully we'll see you again soon. Bye!